Hey guys, just a quick announcement. If you haven't seen my community post, recently I became a Facebook gaming partner and will be uploading exclusive content on Facebook along with the normal stuff I'm doing on Vars and Vars 2. So if you enjoy watching my stuff, feel free to follow me over there as well. The types of videos I'll be making are on topics that I want to talk about but don't feel like they're worth a full video on. And also I do know a lot of you asked me if I'll ever be streaming videos, so I might do that there as well. I hope you can support me on both platforms. But anyways, welcome back to another episode of Why No One Plays. We're gonna head back into the jungle and talk about a champion who everyone knows about for his iconic voice lines, or lack thereof, but never really manages to see more than the occasional fringe use here or there. Today's episode will be featuring Rammus, the Armordillo. Rammus is weird. He's not like Aurelion Sol, where you have a higher probability of getting struck by lightning than going up against one, yet he's also that champion who you can't remember the last time you ran into one on your team or the enemies, but you swear you've seen one recently. Even amidst the Vanguard subclass's tendency to have abilities that are too similar to each other, Rammus is well known for the way in which he plays, something that makes him a memorable champion through his appearance and playstyle. When you think of tanks, your first impression is usually someone big and burly, so tanks like Amumu, Rammus, and Poppy stand out from the crowd for being pretty small, and therefore you don't expect them to be all that durable. What else are tanks known for? Well, they're usually slow. Gragas or Sejuani's dash is noticeably slower than the likes of Akali's. Even those with far-reaching abilities are easy to see coming and therefore react to. Rammus subverts that expectation too thanks to Powerball, his signature ability. He tucks himself into a ball and rolls with accelerating speed, up to 235% bonus movement speed in fact. The rest of the attack is pretty self-explanatory. When he collides with an enemy, he knocks them back, damaging and slowing them. It's such a silly ability, but it's his most defining trait. He can reach speeds far exceeding even the fastest tempo champions like Bearstein Zudir or Singed with Ghost and Insanity Potion. Combine this with a myriad of mobility tank items like Turbo Chem Tank and Deadman's Plate, you physically cannot outrun this guy. So your only option is to fight or hope that you or your teammates have a stun or knockup of some sort. Thanks to Powerball, Rammus can effortlessly gank opponents from several screens away, making him one of the most dangerous tanks to go up against in the late game, where catching out a single mispositioned opponent can win you the entire game. Ordinarily, tanks require their teammates to follow up on their engage, since they lack the damage to take priority targets down themselves. Most of the time. There obviously aren't that many champions who can match the speed of a late game Powerball Rammus, if there are any at all. But fortunately, he doesn't need them, not against AD carries anyway. We've all witnessed it before. Auto-attacking a Rammus with defensive Ball Curl and Thornmill causes you to take more damage than what you can deal to him. And thanks to Frenzy and Taunt, this guy can force you to attack him for up to 2 seconds. Spike Shell makes his basic attacks deal bonus magic damage equal to a portion of his total armor, which increases by 50% while defensive Ball Curl is active. To test it out myself, I went into Practice Tool with standard runes, got Turbo Chem Tank, Tabbies, Deadman's, and Thornmill. Then I checked to see how much bonus armor I would get from Aftershock and defensive Ball Curl to see how much damage his passive could do in conjunction with Thornmill. So with just 4 items, I was getting around 1100 armor. Thornmill and Spike Shell have the exact same scaling, 10 base plus 10% bonus armor. So that'd be 20 and 20% total, increased to 25 and 25% with W. This little bowling ball deals 300 damage to you for every auto attack you dish out to him. Not to mention, he himself deals 200 damage per auto attack on you. So when he taunts you, not only is he attacking you, but you're attacking yourself essentially. Needless to say, Rammus does one job. Find the enemy carry and make a beeline straight for them. His playstyle might be one-dimensional, but no one can dispute how good he can be if you don't have a tank shredder on your team. He's capable of dealing a lot of damage, perhaps even more so than traditional carry tanks like Cho'Gath, Malphite, and Scion. Actually, just recently he got a mini rework, changing his ultimate to Soaring Slam, where he jumps to a target location and deals magic damage upon impact. However, if he casts this ability while in Powerball, enemies at the center of the impact are knocked up, and the range of this jump is dependent on his movement speed similarly to how Warwick's Infinite Duress is. The rationale behind this change was to give Rammus a bit more skill expression and teamfight presence, but this change coincided with the release of Gwen and gameplay adjustments to Rumble and York, which is why hardly anyone acknowledged it. Rammus is one of those junglers who's always been a strong pick. In terms of win rate, he usually hovers around 51 to 52%, sometimes 53%, but that might be a bit misleading as the sample size is quite low, not many people pick him up. This implies that performance is not the issue. See, generally when a champion has a high win rate but a low pick rate, that's either because 1, they're only played by one-tricks who dig in and really get optimal on them, or 2, they're only good in certain cases and are not all that safe to use otherwise. For Rammus, it's the latter. Let me show you what I mean. Despite how fast he's able to charge at you with Powerball and his items, it's surprisingly easy to mitigate or neutralize his pressure almost entirely. If the enemy team has at least one champion who can interrupt you or block your dash, you effectively go from the fastest tank in the game to one of the slowest and clunkiest. Rammus had 2 mini reworks, one in patch 11.8 and one back in 7.10. 7.10 sought to make him less janky with attack damage numbers and deal with the stat-checky nature. But one in particular I want to go over is how they changed Powerball. Before this patch, Rammus would always be curled up until he collided with an opponent or the duration passed, whichever came first. But then, they changed it to be a channeled spell, thus allowing it to be stopped by spells that interrupt channels. Another change they added was in defensive ball curl, greatly boosting the potential armor and magic resist you can get, but now it slows them by 60% during the effect. Why this matters so much is that Rammus went from one of the most unstoppable engaged tanks in the game to one of the easiest to stop. Even if he had stuns or knockups, all he had to do was wait for the CC to wear off then continue going straight for you. Now, any disruption can stop Powerball dead in his tracks. It doesn't even have to be crowd control. Kassadin's Null Sphere, Victor's Chaos Storm, and Camille's Hextech Ultimatum have the ability to disrupt channels, despite not being hard CC. Those can interrupt Rammus too. Also, since it's a movement ability, any slowing effect like let's say Glacial Augment hurts him a lot more. Powerball is often compared with Nunu's W and Sion's Ultimate since they all share the same property of starting slow, then ramping up in speed over time. The latter two aren't nearly as fast, but they're more consistent. True to its name, Unstoppable Onslaught is unstoppable. No forms of crowd control can interrupt him, so like it or not, he's gonna keep moving forward until he crashes into something or someone. Biggest snowball ever can be stopped by crowd control but not slows as he has slow immunity, and even if you manage to tag Nunu with the Morgana route or Jana Tornado, the snowball will continue rolling, so you gotta get out of the way quickly. Rammus has neither privilege. He's ironically more susceptible to disruption than the very opponents he's meant to disrupt. Well, technically speaking, roots don't stop the channel, but Powerball lasts only 6 seconds. If you get hit by Lux Binding, that means a third of your distance coverage is halted. Experienced Rammus players do know how to take advantage of their amazing speed to mix up their pathing instead of running in a straight line. But for those who pick him up for the first time, it can get really frustrating to have your main engage tool be this easy to stop. Rammus depends on Powerball to get within melee range because defensive ball curl slows him down to a crawl. In his defense, pun intended, as I mentioned earlier, once he does get his stubby little hands on you, you better have cleanse or some Jesus on deck because you ever got hit by a bowling ball before? That hurts. By the way, Soaring Slam was kind of implemented as a means to address this. You can build a Powerball for a couple of seconds and then yeet yourself right into the middle of the enemy team. But having to burn 2 abilities for 1 engage is very costly, especially when you account for a second problem. Rammus isn't the only tank who augments his defense to astronomical levels, but his overdependence on armor renders him more vulnerable to tank-busting elements than his peers. For other tanks, their damage numbers are usually separate from their durability, whereas with Rammus, they're intertwined. If his armor goes up, so does his damage, but if it goes down, his damage goes down too. To elaborate, defensive ball curl effectively doubles Rammus's armor, which means the bonus damage from his passive doubles on top of being amplified by 50%. This ability has a 6-second cooldown but can last up to 10 seconds, allowing you to theoretically have it up forever. Thing is, when you use Powerball, it cancels defensive ball curl, so if you were to accidentally use W first then Q, you miss out on a lot of bonus damage and durability. I don't know how many of you have seen those videos from Eldomatrix or Vandero where you were able to get negative armor and magic resist on Rammus, Sejuani, or Leona before, but that's also a way to screw them apart. If the enemy team has any form of armor shred like Black Cleaver or their own such as J-Force Q, Kale Q, Trundle Ult, if you were to cast defensive ball curl before they apply those reductions, you can actually drop into the negative, which makes you squishy as hell and it means all your DPS is gone. I understand this is a very big edge case, but Rammus's armor doesn't necessarily have to go down that much to make his offensive pressure all but irrelevant. If you were to look at his fellow jungle tanks Sejuani and Zac, one other thing you might notice is missing within Rammus' kit is any form of percent health parameter. Sejuani's Icebreaker passive does 10% of her target's health as bonus magic damage, while Winter's Wrath can do 8% of her maximum health as bonus damage. And since we're talking max health, her damage is guaranteed as the only ability in the game that can reduce maximum health is Mordekaiser's Death Realm. Same goes for Zac. Q is 5% of his own health and W is up to 8% of his target's health. Even Nunu has some semblance of percent health scaling. Consume has a 5% bonus health parameter, so he deals more damage to enemies with more health, and he heals for more. Also, lest we forget, all 3 of those tanks have 4 damaging abilities, whereas Rammus really only has 2, his passive and ultimate. Let's be real, Powerball's damage is negligible. Since so much of his damage is tied to building armor, he seldom has the luxury to build more health-oriented items like Warmogs or Anathema's Chains, items that would help deal with true damage from things like Kraken Slayer, Red Buff, Challenging Smite, or just general armor penetration. If a champion has 40% armor pen and he's up against a tank with 1000 versus a tank with 600, he ignores 400 armor from the first tank and 240 from the second, so enemies get more value out of armor penetration against Rammus because he's all armor, something that would normally be compensated for by building health, which he can't do as efficiently. Basically, even though Rammus can outdamage every other tank in the game, that's only if his armor is really high because he has very little fixed damage. Having your DPS fluctuating that much can lead to instances where you one-shot the enemy ADC in one taunt or do virtually no damage. And if that wasn't bad enough, more than half of his damage hinges on something he has very little control over. In extended fights, tanks are able to do surprisingly high damage because a lot of them have percent health scaling and, more importantly, area damage. Not only does Rammus have less area pressure than his peers, but in order to gain maximum efficiency on his passive, the enemy team has to be attacking him, and in League of Legends, there's no way to forcibly draw aggro from your opponents outside of taunt. And out of the 3 champions who can taunt, Rammus is the only one whose taunt is single target, despite being the one who needs an AoE taunt the most. Frenzying Taunt allows Rammus to taunt one enemy in close range, while gaining bonus attack speed for the same duration, so he does have a way to force someone to attack him against their will, but it's got a target range of only 325, has a long-ass cooldown of 12 seconds, and hits only one person. Something I never understood is why does Rammus, the only champion who actually has a built-in mechanic to punish those who get taunted beyond locking them in place, not have an AoE taunt? Alright, I concede that maybe that might be broken considering a Rammus with 3 items and boots can do upwards of 300 recoil damage per auto attack, but when you account for all his other issues, I think we can afford this concession. Zac and Nunu are played far more frequently because they have less restrictions than Rammus, despite doing many of the same things. Rammus' Soaring Slam Powerball combo is almost identical in function to Zac's Elastic Slingshot, except Zac's takes up only 1 ability slot, not 2, and on a basic ability, much less his ultimate. Nunu's biggest snowball ever is Powerball, but more consistent at the cost of a little speed. Actually, Sejuani's ultimate is the same massive area effect as Rammus' ult, but has a long-range stun built into it. Moreover, while these tanks don't have anywhere near the same single target DPS, they beat out Rammus in AoE damage as they each have an attack that can hit all targets around them. At the end of it all, the only person who needs to be afraid of Rammus is whoever he's right next to, but for other tanks, they have enough pressure and disruption to where you can't really walk past them. Among all tank junglers, Rammus is the least consistent and most susceptible to counterpicks. So if that's the case, why does he perform statistically better than other tanks? One word: specialist. You guys remember from my Ahri episode when I talked about how champions who can do one job extremely well perform better than a jack of all trades, right? Rammus is the poster child of a specialist tank. He's an anti-carry, the biggest middle finger to heavy AD or auto-attacking comps. Sejuani, Zac, and Nunu are picked more frequently than Rammus because they're more consistent. They can cover a lot of different scenarios and matchups. But Rammus has a better win rate because while he's a situational tank, whenever those situations occur, there is no one better than him at shutting down physical comps. No one. Besides maybe Malphite, but Malphite is top lane. Ultimately, what it boils down to is that Rammus is not a weak champion, he's just situational. So the reason why no one plays him is because he's not meant to be used for every occasion, and that's not exactly a bad thing. Would it be nice if he wasn't so conditional? Maybe. I feel like they should at least give him some kind of slow immunity on Powerball or maybe percent health damage on Frenzying Taunt. That way it wouldn't be so easy to screw him over, but apart from that, he's fine as is. That's gonna be it for today. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to leave a like, it really helps out the channel. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to watch more content like this. Also, once again, check out my Facebook gaming page for more videos, as well as my second channel for discussion on other games. Aside from that, feel free to follow me on Twitter, join my Discord server, and watch my previous episodes on Why No One Plays if you haven't yet. But until next time, thank you all so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.